Hello world, welcome to the Adrian Moment on TruStory FM. I'm Ocean, and as always, I am joined by my partner in sports movie dissection, Jim Pullen.
Hey, how's it all going?
It's going well, it's going well. You know what let me tell you what I was thinking about today, Jim.
What's that? Tell me.
And that is UFC. And I was thinking of UFC, that's right. I was thinking about it because I have a trip that I go on to Vegas pretty much every year. I've been doing it now for more years than I care to admit to at this point, where I go to a UFC fight in, now it's July. It used to be different months where actually when I first started these trips, it was boxing, but then when we went to UFC, we started doing it in May, and then now I go every July. And so,
full disclosure, I have yet to go with you, and I apologize about that. But
yeah, that's on you, man. You're invited every year. It's like I can tell you what it is this year. You're invited every year.
Oh, open invitation. That's right there.
Open invitation right there. Yes. So then, and it's always a great experience going to UFC fights. First time you ever, seeing them live. There are slightly things that are different from television, of course, but at the same time, it's always a lot of fun. And go every year and go in July. And I'm thinking about it now because I'm starting to finally get around to planning out my trip. I've got my motorcycle's gone through its spring service. And so then it's going to be time that I can get out and go riding. And that's usually when I think about then I'm going to go to the desert and get out there and watch some fights. And so of those things, in all of my experiences of watching UFC fights and enjoying them, one of the things that I've realized that I have a newfound empathy for is something that you would not necessarily think of when doing this. And that is a gambling addiction. And here's why. So, because whenever I go to these fights, I like to bet on fights, but I don't have a lot of money to bet on fights, right? I can't be like, Floyd Mayweather, who can bet $100,000 on a 900 to 1 underdog and win a whole bunch of money on that, right? I have to bet who can bet on favorites. So if you have a whole bunch of money, you can bet on favorites and still win. I have to bet on the underdogs because I need a good 2, 3, 4 to 1 odds to make my money go further.
I hear you.
Right.
Yes.
And so as a result, in doing this, the first probably 7 years of me doing this, I'd always pick up 1 or 2 fights because I had a couple $100 that I always want to, you always want to gamble responsibly and only gamble with money that you can blow. And so I was like, well, if I lose, then this is fine. And so I'd, bet a couple $100 here and there. And every year it'd be the same. Like I would fight for a bit. I'd have a crescendo of maybe he's going to win and then he loses. Right. And then I'm tearing up my tickets and I'm, yelling and cursing for a little bit. And then I'm just like, all right, that was fine. Right.
Right.
And so, and that's always been good fun. But then one fateful year, I bet on TJ Dillashaw for I think there was a 135 pound title. 135 pound title against Renan Barão. And TJ was a big underdog. And I bet, I don't know, I think I bet like $80 on him, right? But he was a big underdog. And TJ, and he ended up winning the fight. And after he won the fight that I won, I think I won $350. So this is not life-altering money. Right. But it was really good. It was really good.
It's trip-altering money, though.
Exactly.
It's trip-altering money.
It is trip-altering money. I won a few $100. And so, and it was so exciting when he won. And I remember when I went to the counter to get my money, I was shaking like I had done something. When I hadn't done anything. I had been on a fight. But I was
just won.
I know, I just won. And then it's like, and I had this euphoric high. And then I was like, oh, I just won I won $350. So let me go to the craps table. And so I put $100 down and then I got up another $300 richer. So I was really winning this night, right? And it was such a great and wonderful high of gambling. And I remember that next day I was talking to someone during the trip about it. And one of the things he said to me, which I believe is true to this day, is anyone who doesn't understand a gambling addiction has never won. Because the second you win, it is this a euphoric high that you then start to constantly try to chase. And I've won other bets afterwards, and it's never been as good as that one. But that is one of the main things that I've learned when I was going to the UFC fights. Another reason why I was thinking about that as well is because of the year 2011. And in yes, 2011.
So that was in 2011 when that happened.
Yeah, well, I like to say 2011. It makes me feel more like, modern. I don't know. Like, when did we stop? That brings up an interesting point. When did we stop doing that? Like, because like obviously 2005, 2006, we just say it that way. But then around, definitely 2020, people say 2020, you don't say 2020 or 2024. But somewhere in the teens, like, is it 2011, 2015, 2011, 2000, like when do you think people stopped saying 2000 and started just going with the 20?
I think you're probably right. It was the 2010. It sounded bad. I mean, because you couldn't just say, "Hey, what year is it?" Oh, it's 10.
Yeah.
It's just 10.
Oh yeah, like you could the 80s, like it's 88.
It's 88. Like, I mean, even like in 2009 or 2005, yeah, sweet. Rockin' 05, right? It's 06, right? So, but, the 2010 comes around and you'll be like, hey, it's 10. That's what I think.
So then in 11, so in 11.
So in 11,
yes. In 11 was the first time that I had seen a really good MMA movie. And that movie was Warrior.
Growing up, we all want to know the toughest kid in the neighborhood was, right? I want to know the toughest man on the planet is. That's what we're going to find out.
Brendan, it's me, Pop.
What are you doing here?
Tommy's back.
Did he say if he wants to see me?
I'm proud of you, Tommy. What you did for that kid in the tank.
What was I supposed to do, let him drown?
Tommy Reardon, you saved my life.
Look, Brendan, the bank has got to go by the new appraisal figures. You're upside down on your mortgage.
How much do you need? I didn't come here for long, Frank. I was hoping that you would train me.
Are you serious?
Do it!
I thought we agreed that we weren't going to raise our children in a family where their father gets beat up for a living.
Brendan, you're a teacher. You got no business in the ring with those animals.
Actually, I used to be one of those animals. Guess I forgot to put that down on my application. There's this big tournament. Top 16 middleweights in the world. And when it takes all, I'm gonna need a trainer of that much you were good at. Frank, I need this. I got a family to protect. Everything I do is for them.
What's going on up here?
Daddy is now a princess.
Mom needed you. I needed you. You're my big brother. You bailed on me.
I was a 16-year-old kid. What the hell did I know?
You had a choice, okay? You had a choice.
War hero Tommy Reardon, who has become an overnight sensation, and Brendan Conlon, the physics teacher, they pulled off a miracle.
You can do this. When you say it,
I can do this.
You got him! This is impossible! The two men fighting for the championship tonight are brothers! Go war!
Are we here to win this fight? Because if we're not, I will throw in the towel.
It was released in September 9th, 2011. And there was various things about that time period that I, looking back on it, remembered as far as not only my enjoyment of that movie, but also just how the rise of the UFC was at that time. So, in 2011, some of the few significant things that happened in the UFC then was in March of 2011, John Jones for the first time won the light heavyweight championship of the world. And yes, exactly. So that was the beginning of the reign of the GOAT. And he, kept that title for quite some time. And in November, in November of that year, Junior Dos Santos beat Cain Velasquez for the heavyweight championship. Now, those two names are not significant necessarily in heavyweight lore. They were good fighters. But what was significant and why that fight was significant is it was the first time the UFC was ever on Fox. And for that show, one of the mistakes so it was a big deal because it was on Fox. It was the first time that UFC was making the mainstream, because really, which it's weird to think about now, but it's really only been about 10 years or so, 10, 15 years. when UFC has been considered more mainstream. The early days of UFC, I think John McCain famously called it human cockfighting, which when you look at those early fights, I mean, wow. It kind of was. They could do anything. But now, now it being so mainstream as it was, it's hard to think about, at that time frame in 2011, that, it was the first Showtime was ever on Fox. It was on a national audience. The thing that I actually laughed about with that whole thing was that Fox made this massive mistake that they didn't show the entire card. The only thing they showed was the main event, was Junior Dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez. That was it. And for those that don't remember, Junior Dos Santos won that fight in 64 seconds. So it was like, hey, here are the fighters. All right, sit down. Let me reach for my popcorn. Oh, he's down.
Yep.
And that was it.
all the build up from nothing.
Right. It was like a Mike Tyson fight, but you didn't know you were going to watch a Mike Tyson fight. Because with Mike Tyson, he was knocking guys out in 90 seconds. You're like, oh, that's fine. That's why I'm here. And so that was their big mistake from it. Which then after that the UFC wasn't on Fox again for quite some time, but then it recovered, gained prominence, and there's on ESPN now, and they have all sorts of deals. But the other few things that was going on in 2011, which were significant at the time, was that Anderson Silva, he was 5 years into a 7-year run as middleweight champion, and Georges St. Pierre was in the 4th and final year of his welterweight championship run, and so those were the 3 of those 4 fighters are significant in the pantheon of UFC. And that they were in 2011, which is when this movie was released, they were really at the either peak of their powers or near the end of the peak of their powers, but they were still, doing great things. Exactly. Yeah. They were still king. They were still doing great things. And so I think that created a situation where a movie like this was ready to be made.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up this movie the other day to watch it and talk about it, because like 2010, 2011 for me, man, that was baby time. So I didn't know about this movie until you brought it up, and you're like, hey, let's watch this. And I was like, all right. I was looking into it, and everything that you're talking about, around that time period, it was a question that I wanted to ask you, was like, what really was the UFC like in 2011? Because it was getting ready to totally pop off, like everything that you're saying. And knowing that you go to the events and whatnot, it was like, oh, well, I wonder what Ocean was feeling like in that 2011 and in that moment when this movie was coming out. I mean, that's amazing that you bring that up. Just popped off one of my questions, man.
It was fun to go. It was still new to me as well. That was early days for me to transition to UFC. I think I really only transitioned to watching more UFC about 2 or 3 years earlier. And so the main thing for me at that time was also still getting used to how to handle the screen in a live event. When they're standing up fighting and you're watching it live, you typically are watching the fighters. But when they go to the ground, you can still see the fighters. But if you really want to see what they're doing, you end up looking up at a screen. And that it's a thing that now that I do, and anyone that's been to a live event just does and doesn't really think anything of it. But it was still weird to me then, because before that, most all the live events that I'd gone to, live sporting events, you don't spend time looking at the screen. You're going to look at them. I mean, you will in football or basketball, you look at the screen for a replay, but you would not look at a screen during live action. And that was something that you get used to in UFC, and also how to transition back and forth. And that's really, as far as what I was at that time was thinking those things. And also I was gaining an appreciation and falling in love with the sport that I'm glad that a good movie had been made about.
Yeah, this movie, for somebody, I enjoy UFC, and at that time, with the whole baby thing, and I was more into WEC. Remember, where Uriah Faber came from, right?
Yes, yeah. They have the lighter weight classes.
Right. Yeah. So, I was really into that. And then, when they got consumed up by UFC, I followed some of the fighters that came along with that at that point in time. And then, just ended up like falling in and out of love with the UFC.
Why did you fall? Why do you have a rocky relationship with the UFC?
Because it seemed like there for a while, I would buy an event and it would be like the most boring event ever, where it was just more like people hugging each other and really not slugging it out. And really, I mean, the grappling was like, it's okay. Right. But it wasn't anything like previously watching. So, for me, I mean, and that was like, I don't know, like 2018, 2000, a little bit before that. It was just like, I don't know, I was just starting to fall out of love with it because it just seemed like it was more slaps and hugging than anything else. But, but concerning this movie though, now this movie, it just kind of like reinvigorated me a little bit more about the UFC. The fight scenes in this movie are amazing. I mean,
yes, they are.
For somebody who's only been to a UFC, never been to a UFC event, and only watching it on TV, this movie is very action packed, similar to the way that I'm trying to watch it on TV, like a UFC event. And there's some really good action hitting and grappling that was going on that, watching, any of the UFC stuff, like the house that they used to do.
The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, the Ultimate Fighter. Yeah, like I loved watching the Ultimate Fighter. Those first like 10 or 12 seasons, they were great.
The end of season 1, that final between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bond is the greatest UFC fight I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
There's not even. I don't even know if there's a close number 2. That is the greatest fight I've ever seen. But in speaking of the movie with the fighting, with fight scenes. I guess let me just throw in my little 2 cents about what I think about how well the movie handled the fight scenes. Because there was a lot of parts of it where I was looking at this going, well, because it's a little bit fantastic. And what I mean by that is you're seeing some things you don't typically see in a regular fight. The main thing, for example, that pops in my head is Koba. So Koba, who was awesomely played by Kurt Angle. Yeah, who's awesomely played by Kurt Angle, he's doing different throws, and he does some suplexes. He does Greco-Roman throws and suplexes. And so when I first saw that, I was like, well, no one does that. And then I started wondering, I started thinking through, well, is that legal? And it's like, well, yes, that's illegal. You can do that in the UFC. It just doesn't happen that often. Every now and again it does, but it doesn't. But it doesn't, but it's just not an often thing. And similar to a lot of his pick up and throws when he's slamming guys and throwing people all around the ring, those are all things that you can do in the UFC. It's just not often that a guy can get another one up. An opponent that's resisting you usually isn't going to let you do that to them. And it's
true. Yeah,
you're right. So the guy's not going to be like, hey, I'm going to let you pick me up, and why don't you just throw me on the ground? How does that sound?
But it was great movie action, though.
It was.
It tells a pretty interesting story from, movie cinema and from the big screen. It's like, hey, here's this big dude that can just flip people around, and he's a big threat. Exactly. Right? It's going to be scary going in there.
Yeah. No, exactly right. And it does create more tension, drama, and more action for you when you're watching the film. But it is the thing where I was looking at it thinking, oh, yeah, you can do that. Even the scene when Koba throws Brendan up against the cage and he drops down to the ground, I was looking at that going like, yeah, you can do that. When there's a scene where Tommy, when he has that fight with, that Mad Dog Grimes, when you look at that fight, he just clotheslines him and then drops him to the ground and starts punching him. Again, I was thinking, oh, yeah, you can do that. And so what I think through about, and this was my little 2 cent opinion about how they handle the fighting in the movie, it's while you are seeing moves that you don't see on a regular basis, they did pay, I think, that were very respectful about only showing things that guys can actually do. There's really 2 things that they did in the movie that I saw from a fighting standpoint that you can't do, and it's just you can't do it now. One, which is a minor thing, is you can't grab the cage. So there was a couple scenes where people would grab the cage to hold themselves to keep upright. You can't do that anymore. You could then, but you can't now. And the other one was there was a scene where there was a guy kneeing someone when they were down. And you can't do that now. But there was definitely in that point in time a gray area where you could.
Well, and didn't it back then too? Didn't it also depend on what league? Because at the time there was a couple of different MMA, like UFC, but in WEC there was a couple others, and they all had like different variances as to what you could do on the ground versus like UFC, for example. I mean, UFC I think probably has some of the more safer, quote unquote, safer rules.
Yeah,
when
as safe as MMA can be.
Right, as safe as that can be. But and I can't remember which one it was, but I remember thinking like there was one that you could hit people in the back of the head, and it was like, what is that? Or you could knee to the face if they were down on all fours versus
that's Pride.
So Pride had that.
Pride actually had for quite a while they could do soccer kicks, which is crazy.
That's insane. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah, so Pride had some of that. And with the UFC, they had initially their kneeing of a downed opponent was just limited to not the head. You could knee him anywhere else. Where now you can't knee or kick a downed opponent anywhere.
Right.
But they, back then you could. And so then to me, that was part of where I was like, oh, well, I felt that they did do right by the sport in that while they showed an action-packed version of what it was, of what MMA is, it was legal what they were doing. That is what it would look like, and that is in a lot of cases. Well, that is what would happen.
So they were paying. You would say then that they're paying really good respect to the UFC and MMA and fighting in general.
Yes.
But what is your thoughts though? Truly on some of those over the top throws. I mean, like. Are we?
Some of those throws, I've seen that. The most significant fighter that did it most was Matt Hughes. He wouldn't always throw guys. He would lift them up and then run across the cage and then jump in the air and slam them on the ground. And so his body never disconnected from their body the way a throw would, but they would do that. Also, there are other times you see throws. The thing about throws, especially in an MMA fight, is it's not necessarily a very advantageous thing to do, because typically once you gain that upper hand and the ability to do that, you don't want to then separate from him and throw someone away from you, because then they can re-scramble and set back up and then start to defend themselves. And that would be one of the main reasons why you typically don't see it in a fight, because they don't want they'll slam a guy down, but they won't necessarily, separate from it.
Right. Yeah. And plus the amount of energy that it takes to, lift up another man of your stature that you got to throw.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah. The only, honestly, when it comes to that, and I guess to put the button on that for me, was the only thing when it came to the fighting that they did that was like, okay, that would not happen, is the last fight at the end. Tommy has a dislocated shoulder. He's not coming out. They're not letting him come out for that round.
I was wondering about that, because I mean, sure, you can shrug off some injuries and, a ref isn't really going to, if they know you, the ref is going to, not really mind you all that much and just, let you continue to fight with your injury or whatever. But that clearly, I mean, he's coming out and he's just swinging with one arm, and he's totally favoring the other arm. I mean, maybe way back in the day, like UFC 1 through 10, maybe 1 through 20, something like that's going to happen, where the ref's just like, whatever, dude.
Whatever. Yeah.
It's a fight to the finish.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't tap yet. So do what you got to do. Yeah. And so, but they wouldn't let him come out. I have seen guys dislocate shoulders and still fight through that round, with it and done that, but not and keep going, or not with anything, especially one that's significant. There have been other fights I've seen where you hear about fighters afterwards that they did separate their shoulder a little bit, but it wasn't as visually obvious and as significant. They would still, while in a lot of pain, throw a punch with the dislocated shoulder's arm. But if they're ever at the level that where Tommy was at the end, where he just really couldn't even use the arm, they wouldn't let him come out.
Would you say that's the best attribute of the movie for you, is the similarities of actual UFC and what this movie is bringing to the audience?
Yes. For me, it was the combination of what they're doing with the fights, how much of what you see is legal in MMA, so that it made me really kind of dive a bit more into it as well. And then, just the overall presentation, the idea that drove the story, at least that half of the story. Because really this movie has two halves of a story, and both of it I think are great. There's, all the family drama in their life and the situation that got them into this. And then there's the fighting scenes themselves. And for me, yes, the fighting scenes were what I really did enjoy. But I think that I enjoyed them not only because of the presentation, but also because of the meaning that the movie provided for like why they were fighting and what each fight meant to these guys. Yeah. So what for you was the best part of the movie?
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I enjoyed, the action and all that. For me, I actually really enjoyed like the dark side of the story. So the other half that you were talking about, like
the part when Darth Vader showed up.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good.
Exactly. That terrifying moment, the first time they see Darth Vader, the dark side. Yeah, no, the whole toxicity of, what these men all went through growing up, as well as what the father was putting them through and whatever demons he was going through in his own head. The cool thing that I liked about the whole dark side of this movie, the toxicity of it all and how it really helps, drive, the reason behind their abilities to be able to fight the good fights that they're able to fight. And some of the struggles that it took them as fighters, Tommy and Brendan, to be able to become the fighters. But that toxicity fed them their abilities to be able to fight. And I enjoyed just the dark side of it. But to me, one of the sides that I liked about it was that you didn't have to go deep into all the details of the true toxicity that these people were growing up with and that dad was putting them through, and it's, and everything that he was going through possibly in his own brain. There's so much there that I feel that people could just like kind of grab onto and unfortunately, probably relate to as well. That just comes out of it.
What grabs you the most?
Grabs me the most out of all the
out of all that toxicity, because there's even the part of what when we were saying, I was thinking about, well, you just kind of have to accept that Brendan is a fighter because he says he was. With Tommy, they do definitely establish it a bit more, showing the clips and all that. And Brendan just says, "Oh, I used to fight in the UFC," and it's like, "Oh, really? Well, maybe someone should have brought that up, right? That seems like something you don't just fall into, So, but like, what of their lives? What grabbed you the most?
Well, just okay. So, the implied and discussed, toxic dad. Here he is. He's obviously a drunk. That was going through some things earlier on in his life.
He was.
I'm saying
he's not now.
Not now, but was.
Yes.
That's key.
Yes.
That while the children were coming up, and they're growing up, they had this toxic dad that one person's going to feel like, oh, well, he played favorites with me. And the other's like, oh, all I did was try to get your attention, and all you did was drink, and all you did was train this kid, not me. And I went to you for help, but all you wanted to do was the other. There's something about that. And there's, to me, that's what I really enjoyed about that whole toxicity between these three men and their own battles with ultimately their dad, everything that he was putting them through. But it's what drew them all back together in a weird, sick way. But it also is, what kind of holds, Brandon a little further away from dad. And, I don't believe that they, get together and, are like hanging out on Thanksgiving anymore or anything like that, even after the win or anything. But, it's just,
after the win of the tournament?
No.
After the win of which win?
Yeah, the tournament.
The tournament. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Well, I don't think that I agree with that. I don't think that they're necessarily hanging out or anything after that. But I think that there is the part about the favoritism thing. I think that they did communicate that very well. But it was a bit nebulous to communicate that he was training effectively. It seems like he was training both of them. And I didn't really get that until I really started thinking about it on reflection. That the movie doesn't characterize that he's training both of them. I thought he was just training Tommy, and then Brendan was his brother along for the ride.
Right. No. That's what I got too. Yeah. Is that but even with Tommy going back to dad to come and train, it's his toxic. His toxic need for his dad, but then also the narcissistic of like, okay, all we're going to do, you're not going to talk to me. I don't, he brings him coffee in the morning and he's like, I don't need an alarm clock. I don't need coffee. I just need you to train me. Like there was clear lines as to what he needed, because here's this toxic man that just knew how to train him the right way, according to the way that Tommy wanted to be trained. I don't know. It's dark and it's, it might not be attractive to some people, that story, that portion of the storyline, but really I can see some light in there though. It's like everybody's just comfortable with each other's disgustingness. And here it is, it brings them back together for the ultimate moment of the story. They get to go off to this big fight to fight against each other and everything.
Well, they do eventually with that, but their situations seem to me more estranged, where it's clear that Patty, the father, played by Nick Nolte, who got an Oscar nomination for it and is well deserved in my opinion. Yes. He hadn't even met the younger daughter, and nobody had seen, another of them had seen Tommy in 14 years. Right. And so they, so they're really all just estranged from each other. And the younger daughter, I think, 5. She looked like she was about 4 or 5, somewhere there.
Yeah, I'd never even seen.
They may have mentioned it in the birthday party, but like she was younger, and that that they never saw each other, and they were estranged, and then they just weren't around each other anymore because of the history of his drinking and what it did to that family and what it did to the mother and how it affected how the mother and Tommy just left. And Brendan didn't.
And Brendan didn't, right? And Brendan, he stays for his own reasons, and they go into that, and I kind of wish they would have gotten into a little bit more of, why Tommy and Mom left. I mean, obviously it was bad.
Well, they do enough, at least for me, was that the clearly Patty was a drunk and he beat on his wife, presumably beat on the kids, presumably just trained them in a very abusive way. One of the two happened. I'm not really sure which, and that is why they felt they had to leave. And I think that a huge part of that was that the mother felt that she needed to leave, and she wanted the sons to come with her, and only one was attached to the mother enough to then go, and the other one had really an attachment to his girl, who he ended up marrying. He married his high school sweetheart, but he also had a latent desire to finally be the favorite. That if Tommy leaves, then Dad will love me the most.
Right. Which, to me, with him being the oldest, I thought that was an interesting need that Brandon needed, that he, or the acceptance that he thought he was going to get, it was like, I mean, I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest out of 2. So I've always thought that something like that would happen. Like when my brother left the coop and he was gone, he went into the Marines. I thought, wow, I'm gonna get some more mom and dad attention, and I didn't. No offense, mom and dad, but I mean, here's the oldest, and here's the oldest in our story here, and he is, he's thinking that when Tommy left, he was going to finally get some attention.
Well, I think some of that also depends upon whether or not in your situation, if you think that your brother was clearly the favorite, right? You can tell from their perspective, it was clear to Brendan's mind that Tommy was the favorite. Whether true or not, that was his impression. And so so I can see that if you, so I'm an only, so I'm just projecting. But if you have it clear in your mind that your brother is the favorite, then yes, I could get why you would say, all right, when he leaves, then I'll get the love.
Yeah, shout out to other youngers. It's rough. It's rough being the low man on the totem pole sometimes. But and I'm sure it's tough being on the top too. It was it was tough. It was I believe, and I thought that later on in the movie they ended up kind of going over it a little bit in some other conversation where Patty was talking about the different training, and Brandon was like, all I ever wanted you to do was train me, and he's like, well, I wanted to train you or I couldn't train you because you just wouldn't, he said something. There was something in there and I don't remember it. And I don't have it in my notes, Ocean, but do you remember that scene?
Well, the scene I remember is about someone else. It is when he is talking to his trainer, to Frank Campana. Campagna? I'm not sure about that last name. Yeah. When he's talking to Frank about that when he says he wants to come back to fight, that he's like, well, you never listened to me before, so why would you fight now?
Right. Oh,
I think that was talking to Frank, not his dad.
Yeah. No, that's true.
The father-son relationship dynamic, I think, was mostly just, it was abusive. You have 2 lines of communication between Brendan and Patty.
Right.
You're abusive. You have 2 lines of communication, the telephone or mail. I forgive you. I don't trust you. Get out.
Yeah. No, and that was a great scene. That was great because you see how he's just done. He doesn't want anything to do with his dad, and they've had those clear lines for a while, and obviously, not being able to see his own grandchildren as he sits there and pines about, like, oh, hey, I haven't even seen her. She's been married. She's been married. She's been born. I haven't even seen her since she's been born. Since she's been married.
Exactly.
That's soon. That's going to soon happen to him.
The 5-year-old did not get married.
Right, 5-year-old did not get married. No.
Yes. No. Yeah, that would be a very different movie.
All right, so we've talked about the good. What's the worst thing for you in the movie?
There really isn't something that is awful.
Okay.
I just have like little quibbles or tidbits of various things.
Okay.
The thing that jumps out to me the most is about Brendan being upside down on his loan. It doesn't make any sense. That's not how loans work. So the initial premise of why he goes back into fighting and why he wants the money and why he needs it and everything, when you really break down what that financial advisor was saying, it doesn't make sense. That's not how loans work. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah, the whole he's all talking about the assessment on your house and all that, and
right.
Yeah, you're upside down. I mean, I think you're only really upside down in the sense of that conversation if you have a loan. Let's say the value of your house is $350,000, but your loan is $400,000. And you still you owe less than the value of the home, the assessed value, or you own more on the loan than the value of the house. So sure, it was $400,000 when you bought the house, but you have like $360 left on the house, but the assessed value is $350. Now you're upside down.
I think I followed your numbers, and then that is what it is. Just the value is less than the loan,
right.
But the thing with that is, and this is why it didn't make any sense, is, well, with a loan, you just keep paying the loan. They're not going to take your house in that situation.
Right. Oh, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
The only way they would take your house is if you stopped paying.
Right.
Which he's not doing that. They're working 3 jobs, not they're stop paying. So you have to either stop paying, or it would affect if you tried to refi the house at that point. You couldn't get that loan.
Yeah, and it doesn't make because it seemed like he was talking about like they needed more money, but his kid isn't doing any more surgeries or anything like that. But they've already, and they're kind of talking about debt at that time, but they don't really say that they have any debt. So yeah, it's like, was he looking to just like cash out? I mean, like cash out some equity. I mean, it's because it almost sounded like he was like wanting to refinance and cash out, and
it wasn't any of that. It was just a contrivance of the movie glossing over. Let me give the character motivation. The motivation is the bank is going to take your house. But at the end of the day, the way they got to how and why the bank would take your house, well, that's not how loans work.
Right.
And so that was weird.
I was trying to help justify it.
Where, exactly. Yeah, you can't. It's one of those things that is weird in that it's fake, but it's to create the drive that you need for the rest of the movie. I kind of forgive the movie of it, and that's kind of. But also, I think it speaks to how much I did like this movie. In that is my primary quibble.
Right.
The other part of the other quibbles I have was, there was aspects of the wife that I found a little bit, exactly. There was aspects of the wife that I was not a fan of. So then, and that is, and that really what my problem with the wife was, that I felt that, Tess. And so the wife, Tess, played by Jennifer Morrison, was that I felt that she was kind of just a front runner, right? And it's a weird type of having a problem with her in that she clearly doesn't want him to fight. She doesn't care about the money. She's fine with that. She's supportive in that vein. So she's not like some, evil, all-encompassing evil person. But once he starts fighting, then the sports fan in me kicks in with like, okay, well now that he started and he's going in at some point and everything, you should start trying to support him. And I felt that she didn't really start to support him until he started winning. And then that felt more like, she's been a front runner.
Well, I mean, okay. I kind of see what you're saying.
Okay.
But from her point of view, she didn't want to see him, being the demented, beat up version that he was in the emergency room from his last quote unquote UFC fight.
I don't know about demented. She just didn't want to see
those
him
are my
beat
words,
up. Sure.
But, he was a drooling mess. He was concussed, as he said.
Yes, he was concussed. Yeah. But once he started winning in the fight, then all those concerns went away.
Right.
Then she was all like, then she was like, oh no, you keep going, stay up, get out of there, all this. So she becomes just full on into it. But it's like, you love me now that I'm winning. Now granted, the relationship is portrayed as a strong marriage. I just think that with this movie, when I flashback and quibble on things, that to me with her, it felt very much like she came to the party late. And that she should have been there with him at least through this more,
right?
But that's my opinion, right? It made it an interesting story, right? It was interesting with her waiting for the cell phone to ring, and then she's all celebrating, and then the next fight she's watching the fight, and then next time she's there, right? It creates a transition, and it's a nice little fun aspect of the movie. I just felt that. It just felt like a front runner to me. I don't know. I like that. I like it better when I thought that she should have been there earlier.
I agree. And it was funny because when we were watching it and, she's sitting there and she's staring at the phone and then, and then she's watching it on TV, his next fight, so phone is for fight 1, TV's for fight 2. And then, she's there for fight 3 and 4. And I like the progression of it, but I agree. It was something that the wife and I actually kind of talked about. It was like, why are you like partially supporting him? But you're not. You're vested interest because you're waiting for the phone, and then even that, as she's waiting for the phone, it's like, the intensity of how she's waiting for the phone even changes. And then later on, she's like sitting there snacking and just throwing some chips down her throat because she's like, she's anxious. But I think I would have rather have seen it or rather have liked it. Like if we could, change it a little bit. Either she's not there and, she has like a Rocky type, Adrian type moment where she's like, no, I don't want to support you. You're not going to go. And then she's there at the end, or she's just there from the beginning, because even when he started fighting, at the titty bars, for, when he thought that, she was getting fooled.
First off, those are gentlemen's clubs. And,
he said titty bar.
Secondly, secondly, they were in the parking lot.
But they weren't
Okay, they were not in the gentlemen's club fighting.
I don't want to get some people excited.
Right. It was it was a wholesome family event in the parking lot of a gentleman's club.
Right. I mean, even the ring girls were dressed appropriately. So,
well, for ring
girls, yeah. But even then, she was kind of supportive because he's like, hey, I can make a couple $100, versus, being a bouncer, where I'm making $9 an hour or whatever. Right. And so, I mean, she was kind of supportive in that, as long as, you're just fighting people who are just watching UFC. You're not fighting real fighters, So it was like, okay, well, you're going to go off and go play in a beer league of baseball, you're going to go play beer league basketball or whatever, right? Go have fun, honey. I mean, that's kind of the way that she was supporting him, not in those words, but, and then later on, it's just like the whole buildup. I don't know. I agree with you. I would have rather have seen something different than the way that it was portrayed for me.
Yeah. So given that this was your first time seeing this movie, let me ask you this open-ended question, and you can tell me.
Yeah.
Were you rooting for Tommy?
Oh, yeah. No, I was rooting for Tommy. I hadn't really thought of it until you asked, though, because like I was just taking it all in. I was trying to figure out, what is the ending going to be? I love doing that in movies. So I was trying to figure out like, how are they going to match up? And because, I don't know. Should I do a little spoiler or something? I mean, do we care? But
there's no such thing as spoilers. There's no such thing as spoilers in the Adrian Moment. Okay. All right.
But yeah, Tommy, I'm rooting Tommy.
Okay. So then, and I think about that less about the strategic tactical parts of the characters they portrayed, but then with the stories, if you found Tommy sympathetic, because I know for me, the first time I saw it, I thought that as well. I found Tommy sympathetic. I was kind of rooting for Tommy. I'm also even a little sad Tommy doesn't win. But at the same time, now you're watching it again, is Tommy, when I've seen it twice, I guess I have that benefit of having watched it again, where it like, I don't know how sympathetic Tommy is. Because he's really a jerk to his dad the whole
Absolutely.
time. And while his dad was abusive and it was a horrible childhood and everything you said, at that moment, instead of addressing the person in front of him, he was still treating him as if he was that jerk that he knew as a kid.
Yeah.
And then he mentally verbally abuses his father throughout the whole movie about the training sequence. Everything he says to him is gruff. He is gruff and mean to all the various other people. Like there is the thing, of course, he fights Mad Dog Grimes in that sparring session, and that helps to, get him along the path of where he wants to go to try to, train and get into Sparta, which also creates that viral video, which is how he gets in there, because let's face it, there are some guys that are in there because they're world-class fighters, right. And there's some guys in there because they're going to bring eyeballs to the television. And that's how he gets in the tournament. He's in the tournament, but he's gruff and he's mean to everyone. And then even with his relationship with the father, the entire arc, it comes down to where he doesn't even behave in any type of caring manner towards his father until he breaks his father down to the point that his father starts drinking again and is yelling Moby Dick lines at him. Yeah. And then he grabs him, and it's almost like then he has this solace or comfort in, this is the abusive person that I know. So this I can handle, and this I'm comfortable with. And that he's only comfortable with them in this horrible state.
Right.
And not only that, now that I'm going on my other Tommy checkpoints, yep. There's also the way he's like, you're not my brother, you weren't in the Corps, I don't care about them, I don't care about your wife, I don't care about your kids, I don't know them. There's that scene. And also he was a deserter. Even though the movie portrays him sympathetically, should Tommy be a sympathetic character, someone you root for, or should you always been on Team Brendan the whole time?
Tommy goes through so many different changes in this movie.
Name one.
Dude, at first he's portrayed as like a little, sure, he's gruff with his dad, right? But then you kind of feel maybe a little sorry for him. He's got his little drug issues that he's got going on. He's popping his pills. He's obviously kind of needing something. So, you might feel a little soft spot for the guy who's like, okay, now I'm going to go to the gym. He doesn't say it. He doesn't say that he's going to go to the gym to like turn his life around, but it's visually portrayed that he's going to the gym to just like go and occupy some time and get himself cleaned up and, just get his mind off of like everything that is bad in his life at that moment in time. That's what I took away. Yeah. Right.
Really? You didn't take away that he was just doing it for the money. Now, granted, his cause was noble. Well, because he did it for the guy that died.
He didn't do it for the money until, he's sitting there and he's hitting the bag, assuming that it's within the first week or so that he's at the gym, and he's sitting there and he's hitting the bag, and he overhears the conversation with Mad Dog and and hey, go get this other sparring partner. They're trying to call up some other dude and they can't get a hold of him. And he's like, and he overhears the conversation about, $200. Tell him I'll pay him $200 if you get a hold of, I can't remember the guy's name. And then Tommy overhears that. And he's like, hey, I'll keep your, I'll box him, I'll spar with him. And then, they shoo him away like a shy little dog that he was kind of looking. I mean, he definitely had no confidence in this conversation whatsoever. Not like the confidence later on in the movie. So to me, it's like the very beginnings of his own change, in the beginning of him becoming the person that he ends up becoming throughout the movie. But, here he is, he's vying for an opportunity to spar because of the money. Sure. But then, he also knows too, he knows what's up. He's a good fighter, and he saw what was going on in the ring. So he knows he could take on anything and everything. So yeah, sure. He wants to do this for a couple $100, but then it gets his juices going, and then you see the whole Sparta thing.
The Sparta thing you see before.
Is it before? I mean, sure. Okay. Yeah. When he's signing up.
When he walks in to sign up, that's when he sees it.
But okay. So
that's when you see it in the movie.
So maybe
that doesn't mean he didn't already know it was there.
Okay. Good point. But still, I mean, at least the way that it's being visually portrayed, he is, in there for other reasons, not necessarily to fight the big fight, but he's looking at it and he's just, slapping the bag around a little bit, just kind of getting his sweat on because, he doesn't have anything else to do.
Right. I believe that you are being far more sympathetic to the character of Tommy than I am. I think that there's a lot of, there's a lot of aspects of him where it's the movie set up this way. Tom Hardy's a great actor. So he's going to get some benefit of the doubt of that. And the movie is set up in a way where you are following Tommy. They get split time, but for whatever reason, it felt to me more like it was Tommy's story than Brendan's. Yeah. But I don't know that really in retrospect that he's on the screen that much more.
Right.
But at any rate, it was that when I examine his character throughout the movie, I don't know that he's sympathetic. I think that it was the more sympathetic character won because he had the better reason. Now, granted, Tommy wanted to fight to help out the family of his friend that died. Yes, that was admirable. But then, his brother just won the $5 million, so he can break him off a check for a couple $100 G's and give it to his wife, and it'd be fine.
Right.
But
it's funny. That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, break him off a couple $100.
Yeah, give him a couple $100K.
Yeah.
Just like,
to that family.
Here's a couple bands for you, bro. All right, and then here's a couple bands for your Marine bro. All right, have a good one.
No, he's not gonna give anything to his brother because his brother's about to go to jail. So that's the other thing too. Tommy's headed to a court martial. Well, it was a deserter, so I don't know if you don't necessarily go to jail. You probably be just dishonorably discharged, or you have to come back. I don't.
Well, you definitely have to.
Depends on how they handle all that, but yeah, he might not go to jail, but at the same time, he would. At the same time that the brother could, break off something for the family and take care of that part, that's kind of left in the viewer's imagination with the end of the movie. But I do feel that that Tommy's actions throughout this show that he did not grow from anything outside of his abusive childhood, where Brendan to me did.
Right.
Brendan is clearly not the same person.
Right. Which is, and like you mentioned with the whole, it's equal screen time between the two, you definitely get that vibe that, one has completely moved on. He's a teacher. He did his UFC thing. He married his high school sweetheart. He's got some kids. And the other, moved away to Tacoma. Shout out to Tacoma.
Yeah, Tacoma.
And he moved in with his mom, and it was rough, and what he ended up sharing about his life, and not having heat sometimes, and all that stuff, and I think you feel drawn that you're like, I have to give him the sympathetic nod because of all the hardship that he's gone through, but yet, really, if you think about it, and I like that you're bringing it up because it kind of does change. The next time I watch this, I'm gonna have a different thought about it. Is because you're drawn in to want to give him that sympathy because of his hardships of growing up and everything. You're kind of distracted of the things that Brandon is doing. You're just like, yeah, he's a teacher. He's probably making good impressions on everything. And you don't want to really pay much attention to him. And they're having that equal screen time. So I want to watch it again now. Now I want to watch it with like a whole different set, because that point that you're making, his character growth that I initially said, yeah, there's character growth. I think there's like visual character growth, but like the way his demeanor, the demeanor of the character has never grown from that time that they moved to Tacoma. It's the same way that any upset child is going to continue to treat his dad and continue to treat his brother that left him. From his point of view, you left.
He left the brother.
Yeah, you didn't come with me. You were supposed to come with me. As Tommy says, right? So he feels like you abandoned me too. We left dad, and we were supposed to be there for mom, but you stayed behind. And he's all upset about it. He never grew up, but yeah, I have to watch that again now with like a little bit of a different mindset because I think I fell into the trap of the sympathy aspect of like, he's drawn in the hardship. And I even said earlier, oh yeah, I went through all these changes, and his character does grow, but it's in a different way. It's not, man, you pulled that apart. That was a good one. I like that.
Yeah. I just don't, I don't think that his character really grew.
No,
I think his character grew in terms of the fact that he had enough power now to speak truth to power and also potentially, fight the old man, because the old man represented all the evils of the world. So he was strong enough, big enough, tough enough that he could physically fight back and was not going to be in any real danger from him in that manner anymore. And has enough, he's an adult now, so he can say enough things to then get under his old man skin while his father is attempting to reconcile with him. But I don't. Like I said, you're being more sympathetic than I am.
I was, but I mean, but it's that toxic aspect that that you're bringing up that I love too. So I mean, it's like, yeah, I fell into the trap. I fell into the Hollywood trap of like, oh, look at the sympathy.
Did you have any quibbles or anything about the movie?
I mean, the one. So my worst part about it all is that I just don't really feel like they did a really good explanation as to how these top middleweights are in this battle, in this King of the Hill type of a battle. If I was one of the top 16 of the world, I'd be a little pissed that Tommy was in there, and I'd be a little pissed that Brandon got in there because, the boxer that he was, or the fighter that he was training with, gets hurt during a run, and then all of a sudden this guy just comes in out of nowhere who barely had a 500 record in UFC and can just go ahead and slide in there. There's other people, I would imagine, that would have world rankings over both of these two. But for Hollywood, I understand, you got to be able to find a way to get them in there. But I just don't understand. It wasn't really explained like how you build this fight as the top 16 fighters, middleweight fighters of the world, but yet there's two dudes that are coming in here that aren't ranked.
I think that you're going to have a few things with that. One, there's not even UFC right now goes to top 15. If you put all top 15 in a tournament like this, not necessarily everyone's going to want to see that. They were going outside of other organizations because Kobo wasn't in a part of any of the U.S. organizations. I think in the movie he'd never even fought on U.S. soil. Yeah, he never fought in
U.S. soil or all that. Yeah.
Right. So he was new for that. So they were pulling things together. I think that the way that the contrivance the movie did, which does work a bit, was that injury was less than a week out. So the fighter that got injured, he was already in. It was less than a week until the tournament. So at that point, the next top guy isn't going to come in that scenario on a week's notice. So you're not that likely to even find the next person out there. And then on top of that, contracts have been signed, things have been done. So that means that manager does have the ability to say, hey, which they did that contrivance in this movie, and that sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, but that manager could say, okay, my guy got hurt, but I got another guy, I'm going to put this guy in to take that spot. And so I think that the combination of those two, which are both, either one of them is, you could argue is a little bit of a weak argument about that the manager could then just say, I'm going to put a different guy in, versus I wouldn't be able to get another top guy to fight with that short of notice. But the combination of those factors make it where it's like, okay, it's possible that because it was so close that he could have gotten another guy in.
Okay.
And, had that injury happened 2 or 3 months before the tournament started, no way he gets it.
No, and that's a good point. I gotta remember some of the fighters that I've enjoyed watching over the times. Like Cowboy. I loved that guy.
Yes. Yeah, Cowboy's great. He was a great fighter.
He was, and one of the things that I always liked about him is that it seemed like if somebody fell or got hurt and wasn't able to go ahead and take a fight, he was there. He was like, whatever weight class, I don't care, I'll fight. I mean, the guy just always seemed like he was in shape, in fight shape enough that if somebody came knocking 3 days before a fight, he could go ahead and jump in there and just do it. And so, you're bringing up a good point. I didn't really take into account of that, and I was taking it too much to the literal, I think, is like, okay, well, where's some of the rankings? And, if one dude falls, it should just bubble up, not just have these two schmoes off the street,
Yes.
clickbait and a schmo, I mean, that's ultimately what they filled it in with, but it makes sense. I mean, not to say that Cowboy was a schmo in any sense of the word, or any fighter that is able to step up on short notice. I definitely don't want to get my ass kicked by anybody that might be listening to this, but it just didn't seem like, it seemed very Hollywood-esque, but to your facts, it makes sense.
The main thing about the entries of the tournament that to me that was Hollywood-esque was the structure of the tournament itself. This idea of a winner take all is that part to me was the part of it that was crazy about the tournament,
right?
Because these are trained fighters and they are applying their trade. Now they are all the $5 million is enough to motivate them to get in and get you all the big names. But effectively, then you could be in a scenario which you are. If you think about Tommy's situation, where you fight 4 times and you get $0. That all the other 15 fighters, the way they structured it was like, well, you're just not going to get paid anything.
Right. Yeah. You either win
right. You win or you just did you win or you came and did your work for free.
Right. You're the first or you're last.
And that's not how these guys, right. And that's not how these guys work.
No.
Part of the way these guys work, which is, what I cannot do is that they basically live in no fear of each other at all, even though, us mere mortals look at any of them and go like, look, I don't want to fight this guy, but they don't have a fear of that. But it is still a business, so they would still need to get paid in some manner. So the idea of going into a winner-take-all tournament with MMA fighters, that part was the Hollywood part to me. Not that in short notice, some random person you'd never really known or heard of stepped in.
Right. Yeah, and for me, the thing I liked about the idea of the tournament was that, hey, this would be cool if you could get it done in the 2 days, right? It's 2 days that they portray it in the movie, right? So, I mean, I think that would be cool and exciting, but for the fighters, that's damn near impossible. I mean,
it is in the modern time, the way modern fighters are and the way it's structured. But I mean, early UFC, that's what it was.
Right. But in 2011 terms,
you know what? I say that and I think I'm wrong. Pride still had tournaments like that.
Really?
They had tournaments. I don't know if they had 16 fighter tournaments, but they still had tournaments like that would be in either 1 or 2 days.
Oh, that's right.
Where they would do that. So no, these guys.
Yeah, no, that's right.
The tournament structure, even in 2011, it was still around. Like people still did it. So it still happens and it still exists and it can still be done. It just wouldn't be if you lose, you get $0.
Right. Yeah, which that is a little harsh. I would find it difficult to want to participate in something like, I mean, sure, the whole idea of like, yeah, I can, it's a scratch off ticket. I can get $5 million. I mean, ultimately that's what it is. It's a physical scratch off ticket that you're either going to get beat up like the coin or the underside of your thumb for scratching off that scratch ticket. And that's your winnings. That's all you got. You just got that junk underneath your thumb. That's it. If you didn't win it.
If you were not a fan of MMA, do you think you can still enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could. There's, I think there's enough, like even what we've talked about, that you can draw from the characters or the storyline or the action as an individual that is not, really into MMA. It's not gory at all. There's not like a whole lot of blood that's all over the place. There's massive cuts that's just oozing. There's, a couple of little crunching sounds for some arms and stuff, but there's nothing gory about it. So yeah, I would definitely.
A couple of crunching sounds for arms.
Crunching sounds for arms. Seriously, I mean,
I guess if I'm not an MMA fan, you're really making it sound like, wow, this is really violent.
No, I mean, from visual and sound effects, it's not like. Look, I've seen fights on TV that were way gorier than the fights in this movie. So, because some people don't like my oldest son, he doesn't like UFC because he doesn't like all the blood and the gore of it. But he's a boy, he loves chaos. He loves like accidents and stuff like that. But you put him in front of like UFC and stuff. No, man, the kid does not like that.
So what you're saying is two grown men fighting out, train derailing in.
Yeah, totally. Absolute. Plane crashes. Sure. I like that. Fires. He loves that. UFC. No. And there's other people that I've talked to that, that you ask them like, hey, are you going to watch the fight this weekend? And I'm like, no, I don't really like it. It's too gory. But for those types of people that think that UFC is like too gory, this movie might change your mind about UFC a little bit. And it's because it's not overly gory. It's got some really good drama in there. Yeah. I think if you don't like UFC, you're going to still enjoy this movie.
Man, Jim, it is always great talking about movies with you. To everyone listening to this, thank you for downloading the show. If you would like to continue the conversation about this or any other sports movie, contact us on our Discord page at TruStory.FM. Please rate, like, review, and most importantly, share this podcast with anyone you know that loves sports and movies.
Yes, share it.